Okay, so you know what I'm getting calls on this week is multifamily. I've gotten at least four calls for multifamily. Clearly, folks that are looking to invest in the commercial market have a real interest in multifamily, and for good reason. Multifamily is still performing really well. Obviously, we've seen a little bit of a slowdown, but with rents continuing to go up, multifamily is actually still a great purchase opportunity, definitely a good investment opportunity. There's a number of different ways to go about it. I had a client today, he was asking me about wanting to look at 100 plus units. But then he was concerned about having to compete with some of the big guys, like BlackRock and some of the other big guys that are out there in the ether, the REITs and whatnot. When we actually sat down to have a deeper conversation, I was asking him, what's important to him about 100 plus units. And obviously, if you can get involved in 100 plus units, there's certainly a lot of benefit to that, especially if you have the cash yourself. But most of the time, a lot of the time, those are going to be a combination of investors that are involved in those kinds of deals. And that's what he's doing. He's going to be bringing in a few investors that's going to be helping him. But, one of the things that I think, people want to get into these bigger, like 100 plus unit projects, which is great. I mean, I'm happy to help someone get into that kind of project. But if your concern is your ability to compete, from a cash perspective, then, if you're looking at, and his concern was, let me just back up. His concern was, having to manage, and he didn't want to be, self-managed, and he wanted to be able to outsource the management of the property and whatnot, which I totally understand. But you don't need 100 units to basically outsource the management of a property. Usually, if you have anywhere from at least 20, I would say maybe 25 units or more, usually there is enough money on the table for you to be able to bring in a management company. So you don't have to be at 100 units in order for you to bring in a management company. You can easily do that at 20 to 25. Obviously you're going to want to make sure that your operations are lean and that you're really being efficient and effective at how the property is operating. But generally speaking, as long as the property is in half decent condition, if you're doing 20 to 25 units, then usually there's enough meat on the bone to be able to bring in a property management company to actually manage a property for you, so that you're not having to be that person. So when that was revealed and he understood that, and then I further explained that, oftentimes these big REITs and these, these sort of these corporate and investment firms, when, they like those 100 plus unit properties, they often won't go after the, under 80. Right? That's not big enough for them. They usually want to be a minimum of 100 units or more. Sometimes they'll bend the rules and go slightly under that, but generally speaking, if you're wanting to stay away from having to compete from those guys, and again, this is not a rule, but generally speaking, those guys, don't really pay too much attention to things that are going to be under 80 units. So, understanding that dynamic is really helpful, so that when you are going out looking at some opportunities in the multifamily space, you're trying to position yourself in the best way possible, so that you can be one of the bigger fish, in the game, right? You want to be as big a fish as possible in the smallest pond possible, and that's really kind of the ideal. So a combination of ways of doing that is to don't go after the 100 units. I mean, you can still get 100 units, but do that over multiple, like 50 or 60 unit properties, right? You can still get 100 units. The other thing is that look at the market that you're in. Don't go for primary markets. Go for secondary and tertiary markets where, the cost of acquisition may be lower, one, and you may not necessarily get as much in rent but the cash flow may still be good. The cost of acquisition is going to be lower, and you may be able to still do really well in a secondary or tertiary market, especially if it's in a growth market where there's opportunity for things coming down the pipeline. So you may not make killer money year 1 through 3 or even 1 through 5, but that year 6 through 10, with maybe an exit at year 10 may be really, really strong. And again, these are all projections, of course, and nobody knows how the market's going to go and so on and so forth. Obviously, there's no way to predict all of that. But, generally speaking, we've not really seen decreases in rents, so we don't anticipate that happening. Even when the market goes sideways, usually rents go up, right? So we saw that in 2008 when the market crashed. Rents didn't go down; they went up, right? Because more people were getting out of homes and now renting, and the rental market became in high demand. Now, Florida is going to be kind of I think a unique unicorn, just because of the demand that's here. There's a lot of business that's coming here from other parts of the country. We have a new distribution arm that is on the tail end of development with what's happening on the Space Coast. That rocket travel being added to our distribution network, I think, is going to be pretty significant. One, it adds a whole new distribution arm, right? So you got planes, trains, automobiles, and rockets, kind of a big deal. Two, the people who work in those industries, that's aerospace, advanced manufacturing, those are going to be high income earners, right? This is going to be a pretty significant industry that's going to be sitting here right on the edge of the Orlando market. So I think that's going to bring in a lot of dollars into the area. A lot of folks that can afford homes, have expendable income, all that good stuff. We're still a retirement destination. So you have a lot of folks, baby boomers specifically, that are coming down here, and a lot of them have legacy 401k and pension plans that are giving them the ability to have expendable income. A lot of them also did well in their lives and their careers, so they have that money to be able to spend on entertainment and the nicer amenities for their homes and whatnot. So that's going to keep the economy going. So while we may see a flattening out, if anything, in the housing market, the likelihood is that we're probably going to continue to grow. We just may not grow necessarily as fast. So multifamily is important because we're at a deficit for inventory. There's more people coming than we have homes for. Like it's kind of a problem. So much so that DeSantis has passed legislation that's going to allow developers the ability to build multifamily and that be subsidized, right? It's going to essentially be subsidized to be able to bring in more affordable housing for folks that are wanting to move here, which that's something that's kind of a need, and I don't know what the long-term ramifications of that is, but the short-term ramifications of that is that developers are going to be much more motivated to build multifamily properties if they're bringing in affordable housing. Cities and municipalities are going to be much more open to allowing them to build affordable housing in their communities, which is effectively going to bring more inventory available so that people can move into places and live closer to where they work and all that good stuff. So, there's a lot going on. Multifamily, I think, seems to be a really good play right now. We're starting to get phone calls. The phone is starting to ring again. People are inquiring, asking a lot of questions about multifamily. So, if you do have an interest in that arena, feel free to leave a comment, send me a message, give me a call, whatever works best for you. And I'm happy to answer any questions as it relates to the market. We're definitely, there's a lot of land here, so and cities are being much more flexible with the ability to develop. It's just they're wanting to be much smarter about how they develop. And I was chatting with another client with regard to multifamily, and I think it's important to note that when you're building multifamily in secondary and tertiary markets, it's a different animal than when you're building multifamily in like city centers, primary markets like Orlando and Tampa and Jacksonville and Miami. The reason being is because when you're in the middle of larger cities, there's less emotion that seems to be tied to allowing for multifamily developments, primarily because there are already multifamily developments that are all over the city. They're already used to seeing apartment communities and, build-to-rent communities and whatnot, condos, all that good stuff. So the density is already there. So they're already comfortable with it. When you're talking about smaller towns, it's a little bit more difficult to convince those municipalities to bring in the higher density because they don't want to lose their small town vibe. When approaching these smaller town projects, you're going to need to make sure that you're kind of explaining the project in a way that's going to be beneficial to the city, to let them understand how is it going to benefit the city, and maybe even including some components of that development that'll benefit the city. So I'll give you an example. I'm here close to the city of Mineola, a really cool town. One of the challenges that Mineola has is that it doesn't really have like a city center. There's not like a town center. There's no downtown for Mineola. And right now they're talking about developing a project that's going to essentially build a downtown for Mineola, which is great. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. But if you are a developer and you want to bring in, some density to Mineola, it would probably be a good idea to really introduce, a concept that is going to be very favorable to people wanting to hang out in the area. So maybe there is like a mixed use retail area where it's walkable and people can walk and go to restaurants and retail shops and stuff like that. And maybe there are apartments above that, surrounded by townhomes and single family homes, right? Where it's walkable, bikeable. You can kind of hang out. It's a destination to go to, and just enjoy, right? So that kind of development would be something that I think Mineola would be much more in favor of than your traditional, just an apartment community and some maybe commercial buildings that are going to be on the main drag, right? So, thinking outside of just sort of sheer logistics and really thinking about how a development project, for example, for multifamily might positively impact a community is going to be advantageous for you if you're looking to build in a small town like Mineola or any of the other small towns that are in the area. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of share with you what's going on. The activity was noticeable in terms of people wanting to find out more information about specifically multifamily, also getting some interest in industrial. I'll get into that later. But I want to talk about multifamily today. So if you have any questions, any thoughts, I'd love to kind of hear any input that you have. I'd love for you to comment. Please share if you think someone's going to like this content. And thumbs up, because that all helps with the algorithm. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.